Joining us, I'm Kwon Jang-ho. It seems the green light has been given by the international community for the two Koreas to carry out a survey for their proposed joint railway project. The United Nations Security Council and Washington has reportedly approved a waiver on North Korean sanctions to let it happen. We'll take a further look at this latest development with an expert later in the show. But first, let's get the latest on the other stories we're following today by turning to Devin Whiting at the News Center. Devin?
Hi, Jang-ho. First, some news on the economy. The South Korean government and the ruling party have announced a new set of measures to reduce credit card transaction fees to lessen the burden on small businesses. The new cuts are expected to be implemented starting late January. Kim Mo-gyun reports.
Officials from the Financial Services Commission and the ruling Democratic Party held a meeting early Monday where they reviewed the cost of credit card transaction fees. The officials found that they could save up to $1.2 billion in costs and decided to reduce a large portion of it in a way that will mainly benefit the self-employed and small businesses.
Credit card processing fees of small business owners who register above some $440,000 in yearly sales will be cut from the current 2.05% to 1.4%. Those who register sales between $880,000 to $2.6 million will see their credit card commission drop to 1.6% from the current 2.21%. Commission fees for others with an annual revenue below $44 million will be cut around 0.2%.
The Financial Services Commission claims they expect the proposed cut in credit card transaction fees to benefit a total of some 2.5 million business owners. Of them, 240,000 merchants with an annual revenue over $2.6 million will each be able to save up to $1,900 a year. In response to this, credit card firms from all over the nation expressed discontent over the announcement, claiming that more than 90% of all small-sized firms would benefit from the fee reduction. The firms called for the government to come up with an improved, more effective system. Labor unions in the industry expressed concerns over the possibility of a mass unemployment crisis from operating losses incurred by card companies, stressing they will stage protests against what they call the government's unilateral decision. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
The financial health of South Korean companies improved slightly in the third quarter as shareholder equity ticked up. But their debt also rose compared to last year, and sales for the year are looking flat or slightly lower. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The financial soundness of publicly listed Korean companies improved slightly during the third quarter this year on lower debt-to-equity ratios, which are calculated by dividing a company's total liabilities by its stockholders' equity. Data released by Korea Exchange on Monday shows the debt-to-equity ratio of 585 firms on the benchmark KOSPI came to around 106.6% as of September. However, their combined debt totaled $1.03 trillion as of end September, a near 5% increase since the end of last year. The firm's combined equity, meanwhile, grew by more than 6.5% to $969 billion during the same period. By sector, transportation equipment and construction firms saw their debt-to-equity ratio drop, while those related to coal, petroleum refining, and real estate soared. Although the debt-to-equity ratio recorded in September dropped by nearly 1.9 percentage points from the same period last year, it still remains above 100%, meaning there is more debt than equity when companies finance their assets. This comes amid lackluster sales recorded by Korean companies for this year. Separate data by the Federation of Korean Industry shows 7 out of 10 local small and medium-sized companies project their sales for this year to remain similar or less than that of last year, mainly due to a drop in domestic and international consumption and a global recession. Although 8 out of 10 local conglomerates said they expected their sales for this year to remain similar or improve slightly compared to that of last year, none of them responded that they expected a dramatic on-year sales increase for the same reasons. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
In other news, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the relationship between South and North Korea is important to denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula. In an interview with KFDI News in Kansas on Sunday, Pompeo said there are many elements to the North's denuclearization and that Seoul and Washington's new working group aims to achieve it by ensuring good inter-Korean relations. He admitted that negotiations with North Korea will take time, but said the Trump administration will be patient and make sure the regime continues to refrain from testing nuclear weapons and missiles. Pompeo added that economic sanctions on the North will stay in place. Visitors to South Korea can stay overnight in Buddhist temples as a unique way to learn about Korean culture and the way Buddhism is practiced here. At a temple stay, you live like a monk for 2 days. It's high on the to-do list for many foreign tourists. Our Sobo Bin explains.
Not far from Seoul is the city of Hwasong in Gyeonggi-do province. It's the perfect location for seeing the vibrant colors of autumn and winter scenery. This is Yongjoosa Temple in Hwasong. With a history dating back 1,700 years, the Temple Stay program offers a monastic lifestyle for visitors looking to take a break from their busy lives.
Temple Stay allows participants to experience a monk's lifestyle and learn about Korean Buddhism and its culture.
The temple runs its own program, allowing participants ways to find their inner self.
Through the program, we learn about temple etiquette, the importance of food through the practice of eating, and there's also the 108 prostration to help participants find self-esteem in their inner self.
From around 3 p.m., visitors start to filter into the temple. What brings foreigners to participate in the Temple Stay program? It turns out a lot of international students are interested in learning about Korean Buddhism.
I really want to explore the culture in every single way. So one way is to explore Buddhism here in the temple and to really see how the monks are living and the practices of Buddhism, which I know is quite big in Korea.
People come to the temple for different personal reasons. By coming here, they can learn about temple etiquettes, Buddha's learnings, and be a part of Korea's culture of Buddhism. As the sun sets, it's time for dinner. Temple food prohibits any meat, therefore it provides a healthy and clean meal. In Buddhism, the practice of eating, or the offering, is part of learning discipline and being grateful for the food given. By understanding this, participants take an appropriate portion of food in their bowls.
It makes me think about food waste a lot, and I think I'll be more careful to, just eat everything that I buy and prepare.
The next day at dawn, participants take part in Yebul, a ceremony of praising Buddha by performing 108 prostrations. The 108 prostrations represent the sufferings that people experience, and although it isn't easy, the visitors do their best. By doing this, they experience a moment of enlightenment and feel an inner calm. Finally, the participants walk up the mountain in silence to connect with nature and find their inner self. Their 2 days at the temple are now over, and it's time for the participants to go back to their daily life.
Well, I try to take away some, that I can have some moments for me as well during my daily life, and as well to enjoy the moments maybe a bit more.
Away from the hustle and bustle of urban life, the Temple Stay program provides a chance to find your true self. Come and be mesmerized by the temple's breathtaking scenery and learn more about the calm and peace of Korean Buddhism. 서보빈, Arirang News, Hwasong.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
Last week, the UN Security Council was said to have approved a limited sanctions waiver for the two Koreas' joint railway inspections. And now, over the weekend, it was revealed that Washington also got on board with an exemption for its own sanctions against Pyongyang. With the waivers in place, the on-site survey for the railway project could start as early as this week. Our Oh Jung-hee explains further.
The two Koreas' railway connection plan, which has been completely suspended since August, looks to gain speed with a couple of exemptions made to the international sanctions over the weekend. According to several government sources on Sunday, the U.S. decided to allow an exemption to its unilateral sanctions against North Korea for the interkorean rail inspections after a bilateral discussion with Seoul. This comes after the UN Security Council approved a limited sanctions waiver on its North Korea sanctions last Friday. With a breakthrough to the months-long deadlock, the two Koreas are currently discussing the schedule for a joint rail survey in North Korea, in Seoul expected to kickstart this week.
We are currently discussing the matter with the North. We are getting ready so that the joint inspections can begin this week.
For the inspections, a South Korean trade and research team will be moving up north. They'll go test the western Gyeongui line first and then the eastern Donghae line. The overall process is expected to take about 20 days. Once the joint inspections are over, South Korea views that Seoul and Pyongyang will be able to hold a groundbreaking ceremony within this year as planned for linking and modernizing their rail and road networks, in that possibly in mid-December. But for the interkorean rail and road project to move further down the track, additional lifting of sanctions are needed both from the UN Security Council and the U.S., as the recent waivers for now apply only to the on-site survey. And that'll require further coordination between Seoul and Washington, as well as stronger signs of denuclearization from North Korea. 오정희, Arirang News.
For a further look at the implications of these latest developments, we have with us Dr. Bong Young-sik from the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. It's good to have you back on the show.
Pleased to be here again.
So the UN Security Council has given exemption from its international sanctions on North Korea to allow the interkorean railway project surveys. Now, as the report there just mentioned, there emphasizes that this exemption is only for the joint survey and nothing further. But still, how significant is this development?
Well, it is significant in a way that it confirms that international community, including the United States and South Korea, major players in pushing the denuclearization of North Korea as the ultimate goal, has the consensus that still it is time for diplomacy to work, not military operations or any other measures. So it is a confirmation that the international community has not given up a hope that complete denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula and building a sustainable peace regime on the peninsula are achievable goals. But the important point is that this is only a waiver for a groundbreaking ceremony of railway reconnection projects and surveys that prepare for actual constructions. So it should not be confused with the United Nations Security Council lifting existing economic sanctions that prohibit any major joint ventures or usage of machineries, timbers, or steel bars for big constructions inside North Korea. So we have a still long way to go if your major objective is to see the actual groundbreaking and construction of railroad systems of both Koreas.
So the UN Security Council has given this waiver, but so has the US. They've given a waiver on their own unilateral sanctions on North Korea to allow South Korea to go ahead with these projects and the survey. Washington has previously held a very strong position, saying that sanctions will be strictly upheld until North Korea gives up its nuclear weapons. But now with this waiver, does this go against what they've said before, or is this still part of what you're saying, this diplomatic drive that they are going towards?
No, I mean, Chang-won, we have to be really careful reading this. United States only expressed what Ambassador Lee Do-hoon, the head of the Korean Peninsular Peace Bureau of the Foreign Ministry said, strong support for these survey activities exempted from the United Nations Security Council resolutions on North Korea. But United States has not changed its position that, as you said, until North Korean regime will take concrete steps for denuclearization, the sanctions will remain in place. So this is just United States and South Korea agreeing to meet in the midpoint. That South Korea wants to maintain the momentum for inter-Korean economic cooperation and engagement with North Korea, including potential beginning of the railroad reconnection project, and the United States wanting to maintain very strong pressure of economic sanctions on North Korea until North Korea's resistance to taking additional steps of the denuclearization will be taken place. So nothing substantial really has been changed.
But still, the US previously has been very strict about, well, they've said that they'll be very strict about keeping the sanctions. Isn't this waiver perhaps a concession, as small one may be, to either South Korea or even North Korea?
Well, if you describe it as a small concession or a nice gesture to help North Korea and South Korea to save their faces, then I would totally agree with you, because there's nothing substantial to be lost for the United States. By rendering support and concession for this symbolic development of the interkorean economic project, the United States can easily justify its argument that economic sanctions have to remain in place until North Korean leadership will take concrete measures of denuclearization. And it can also add a pressure on the Moon Jae-in government of South Korea that United States acknowledge the desire of the Moon Jae-in government. So it is catching two birds with a stone. The U.S. South Korea will maintain the economic sanctions, but at the same time, it will take some litmus test to gauge the intentions of North Korean government about denuclearization. In the same context, we have to pay attention to the statements issued by the Secretary of Defense, James Mattis of the United States, that we are going to have the scheduled joint military exercise in the spring of 2019, which is a Fall Eagle. But the scale and scope of the exercise will be likely reduced, so that we will continue to give diplomacy a chance to succeed. That means that until the first bomb will drop on North Korea, United States, South Korea, and other countries will do their best to help diplomacy work. But conversely, that statement, which seems to be in favor of diplomatic settlement of the issues with North Korea, may be interpreted as a stern warning to North Korean leadership and South Korean government that if North Korean government is not going to take denuclearization measures in timely manners, for instance, before the end of the calendar year 2018, then time is running out for the Trump administration to go back to its very strong stance against North Korea that was demonstrated in 2017. As I said last time, we have to pay attention whether the Trump administration dealing with North Korea will be Trump administration of 2018, a lot of positive attitude with big smiles, big handshakes between leaders, or Trump administration of 2017, when he declares that this little rocket man is on it's a suicide mission.
Well, for at least the South Korean government, this was, for the Moon administration, this was what they've been wanting. So it's a small gesture by the US and by the United Nations Security Council. Do you think this could then lead to more inter-Korean projects having doors open for them to allow further inter-Korean cooperation?
The answer is yes and no. It can be yes if North Korean leadership is going to seize this opportunity to trade meaningful steps in the direction of denuclearization that will satisfy at least the minimum demands of the United States. If the North Korean leadership will not change its attitude with regard to the fulfillment of the agreements forged between the two leaders in Singapore in June, then nothing substantial will change. So it is basically up to what North Korean leadership is going to do as a next step. And we are only about a month away from the end of the year 2018 that Mr. Kim Jong-un has declared that to make as a revolutionary year in terms of boosting inter-Korean cooperation, which actually did happen with the North Korean participation in the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games, which seems to be a very distant memory now. And North Korea did have the first ever summit meeting with the President of the United States. It's a major anniversary. So a lot of big events did take place in 2018, but successes, big and small successes that happened in 2018, often by and of themselves, do not guarantee another repeat of success in the next year.
Some have argued this decision by the UNSC in Washington will send a positive signal to Pyongyang as well, making it easier for them to perhaps come back to the negotiating table, most specifically the delayed talks between Pompeo and North Korean official Kim Yong-chol. Do you think, though, this gesture by the US and the United Nations is enough to bring them back to the negotiating table?
Again, it is up to North Korean leadership to decide whether it is a sufficient gesture made by Washington or it would express a grave disappointment that Washington is just taking the same attitude toward North Korea without taking due consideration of so-called legitimate demands by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. So I guess Mr. Kim Jong-un, the supreme leader of North Korea, is quite busy in taking next step. At the same time, deciding what to be included in the actual content of the New Year's message of the 2019 to his people and the rest of the world.
Let's move on to some other developments that are taking place this week as well. So there will be the G20 summit in Argentina this week, and of course President Moon will also be attending there, and he'll be meeting with various world leaders where he's expected to call for further international cooperation on the Korean peace process. But once again, perhaps the most important meeting will be with his meeting with President Trump. What are your hopes for this trip?
Well, it is not 100% decided whether two leaders are actually going to meet in the G20 summit meeting. And at the same time, if the meeting will, do take place, I mean, more important point is whether there will be an agreement that can be made between the two leaders, because the U.S. position is very straightforward and persistent, that North Korea has to change its attitude first. Otherwise, economic sanctions will remain in place. But Moon Jae-in government's position is in reverse, that in order to induce additional denuclearization steps by the leadership of Kim Jong-un, then we have to ease the economic sanctions strategically. So there is a gap of strategic priorities and sequencing between the two leaders. So unless there is a possibility of the leaders to narrow the strategic gap that does exist between the two of them, then meeting itself will not be that important.
And finally, President Moon is also scheduled to meet with other leaders, including the Netherlands and South Africa. Now, they both have an interesting relationship with North Korea. Can you tell us more about that and how President Moon could perhaps use that relationship as well to help him on his cause as well?
Right. You may wonder why Netherlands and South Africa are important in terms of, international engagement, with North Korea. But South Africa is going to be the member country of the United Nations Security Council next year, and the Netherlands is the chair country of the economic sanctions committee on North Korea. So if Moon Jae-in government is going to reiterate its pitch that in order to persuade Kim Jong-un leadership to make denuclearization steps, then we have to ease existing economic sanctions that have been authorized by the United States Council, then it is appropriate for South Korean government to first contact the chair country, which is the Netherlands, because most of the United Nations Security Council resolutions are not blanket resolutions, but waivers are possible based upon case-by-case decision by the sanction committee.
So we'll have to keep an eye out on that over the next week or so. Anyway, it's always great to have you on the show. Thank you for coming in, and we'll hopefully see you next time as well.
You're welcome.
And that's where we will bring our show to a close. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back same time tomorrow with more in-depth talk on the day's top stories. Hope you can join us again then. Goodbye.